For the past 2 decades, Right to Food have been working towards this right, and there have been a slogan which have been with us throughout these years, which is भूखे पेट भरे गोदाम अन्याय है अपराध. The slogan is still relevant within the reality of this country, where the FCI godowns are overflowing with ration and people are suffering from hunger, malnutrition, all sorts of food insecurity and livelihood crisis. If we see the recent union budget, we can see that the government is continuing the denial towards the social security schemes. And in all these scenarios, the requirement of survey like Hunger Watch is a very important tool. So we'll start with the presentation, through which we'll try to. So Hunger Watch was done in the year 2020, just after the national lockdown in the month of October-December 2020. The results were showing that there has been a food insecurity post national lockdown due to the lockdown among a large section of the society. Over 2/3 of the respondents reported that there have been a decline in quality and quantity of food consumption. Now, when we consider the present scenario, we have been through the COVID-19 second wave, which has been a catastrophe for the whole country in terms of the health scenario as well as the livelihood, which has created a big crisis among people. There have been job losses, income losses, and the health expenditure and indebtedness have increased at a very high level. So in this scenario, we conducted the Hunger Watch second survey in the month of December 2021 to January 2022 to assess the situation of food insecurity after the second wave period. This survey was conducted just before the third wave of COVID-19. We spoke to more than 6,500 respondents across 14 states. The questionnaire was similar to the first Hunger Watch survey, with some inclusion based on the current scenario. The sample which we considered in our survey was purposely among the marginalized and excluded communities, which was taken in terms of the vulnerability, in terms of occupational, social, and residential. The 14 states are as given here in the screen. These are. The sample sizes vary substantially across states. Making comparison is difficult, but all results present here are simple averages and not weighted by population. So, when we start with these survey results, the typical respondent, 64% of the respondents were Hindu, 18% were Muslims, 71% respondents were women, which was our objective, one of the objectives to do the survey towards the women of the family to get the actual scenario of the particular household. 29% were men, transgender were very small. The average respondent was with 44 years old age. Caste division was as follows: 31% ST, 25% SC, 19% general caste, 15% OBC, 6% PDP. The general caste, more than half within the general caste category were Muslims, because largely the Muslims have been considered there. The average household had close to 4 members. 31% of the household at least one member above the age of 60. So this is one of the important analysis from the survey. 80% of the household having the working members. Both female and male working members reported spending approximately 18 days working in the month prior to the survey. So this was one of our objectives within our survey, to assess the income situation of the family. Non-agriculture casual labor is a prominent source of employment in rural and urban as well. In urban areas, about 39% work in informal but regular salary work. In rural, it's 26% work in agriculture casual labor and 15% in cultivation. Another important aspect of the survey was to assess the situation of the children, which have been taken into consideration from various previous studies as well. So we have also taken that 32% of the household had at least one child under the age of 5. 18% of all households had reported dropout after the pandemic from school. Dropout have been one of the major issue after the pandemic from schools of children. Uh, Household income is a very important result which has been shown through the survey. Only 5% households earn more than 15,000 per month from all sources. 70% of households earn less than 7,000 per month. Uh, yeah. One of the important things also is the outstanding debt, which has increased post second wave. We have noticed that from less than 10,000 to more than 50,000 debts have been experienced by families, and those reasons for those debts are various reasons. One of the two important reasons were rent and the health expenditure. Household income by caste category we have tried to divide. Lower end of the income spectrum, which is 0 to 3,000 per month income, is 30% are STs and 24% are scheduled castes. As monthly income bucket increase, the proportion of household that are general or OBC increase, which shows in the result. The top incomes. This is important to know that what happened to the household income over the pandemic. So 66% reported that income fell during the pandemic. Of these, close to 60% said that the decrease have been less than half during the period of the pandemic. So we have tried to question the what was the current monthly income compared to current monthly income. What was their monthly income before the pandemic? So we got this result. So, if we analyze the rural household and urban household, the greater proportion of urban household, which is 69%, as compared to rural household, which is 47%, report that their total monthly income at the time of survey had declined compared to what it was pre-pandemic. In rural areas, 95% of households lived in there, which is one of our objectives, the residential vulnerability. One of them. In urban areas, 40% live in rented accommodation, and of those, 56% have said that they have unpaid rent at the time of survey, which is more than a month. So now, Kalyani will present the.
Right, so now we're moving to kind of the core results that we have on household food insecurity and diet quality. Yeah. Okay. So the next slide, please. So we measured household food insecurity using the Global Food Insecurity Experience Scale. This is a scale that's developed by the FAO, and it's an 8-item experience-based food insecurity scale. So the 8 items are added along the axis of this graph here. So they move roughly from left to right in increasing order of severity, from worrying about not having enough food to, on the right hand side, having to go without eating for the whole day. So overall, if you see, food insecurity is quite common. So more than 60% of the sample reported that they were either worried about not having enough to eat, or were unable to eat healthy or nutritious food, or were only able to eat a few kinds of food. Next slide. So the 8 items on the GFIAS can actually be combined together to form a scale of mild, moderate, or severe food insecurity. And the way that's measured is that if you score 1 to 3 on the scale of 8, that is, you said yes to 1 to 3 questions, that's mild. 4 to 6, that's moderate food insecurity, and 7 to 8 is severe. So what we see is that nationally, close to 80% of our sample reported any form of food insecurity, and that's represented by the height of the bar. And you can see that the height is higher in urban areas, which means that a greater proportion of urban households reported experiencing any form of food insecurity. And then the top part of that bar, which is severe food insecurity, which is households that reported 7 to 8 of the total possible 8 conditions, is approximately a quarter of households nationally, and again that number is higher in urban areas. So this just repeats the food insecurity by.
What was it in urban areas? Sorry.
In urban areas, overall it's close to 90% who reported any form of food insecurity, and about 28 who reported severe. You can actually skip and this is repeating. So then we looked at food insecurity by religion and caste status. So on the left hand side is by religion, and on the right hand by caste categories. So prevalence of food insecurity, any form of food insecurity amongst religious categories. So 87% of Muslim households who reported having experienced food insecurity. But I want to point out that this is actually prevalent a lot across religious and caste lines. So we even have among Hindu households, 77% of them reported experiencing some form. If you look at caste categories, then actually 81% of general caste households reported experiencing some form of food insecurity. And that goes back to the Rajshekhar point, which is that a lot of Muslim households are actually categorized as being general caste. Next slide. One of the questions which is important from the perspective of food insecurity and food shortages, but is not part of the GFIES, is whether anyone in the household had to go to sleep without eating in the months preceding the survey. So we can see we've done this by caste categories. You can see that quite a large proportion of households across all caste categories report that at least once in the month before the survey they had to sleep without eating. Again, amongst general caste categories, that's 41% of those households. And then it's lowest amongst STs, but it's still at 25%. So that's a really alarmingly high number.
What's the total number across categories?
The national number is around 20, somewhere between, it's around a third, I think. I'm not sure, but I'll check in a Next slide. Okay, so one of the important aspects of food insecurity is cereal sufficiency. So we asked the household whether the amount of cereals that they consume was sufficient for their household in the month prior to the survey. So you can see that in the national sample, 41% of the households said the amount of cereals that they had was not sufficient. This again is higher in urban areas at 46% than it is in rural areas at 38%. But overall, that's a really alarmingly high number of people who said they didn't have enough cereal to feed their families. So that, I mean, essentially what we presented on the food shortages so far has indicated that the quantity of food that was being eaten was inadequate. The next aspect of diets is about diet quality. And so this series of questions asked the household how frequently they ate a range of nutrient-rich foods in the month prior to the survey. So we had that in leafy vegetables, pulses, milk, and so on. So we can see that consumption of nutrient-rich diets is actually very poor. So close to half or more than half of the sample reported that they ate eggs, milk, fruit, or flesh foods less than 2 to 3 times in the previous month. So that's less than once a week in the month prior to the survey. And even if we look at dark green leafy vegetables or pulses, which we might expect would be more accessible, more than a quarter of households said that they weren't able to eat them more than 2 to 3 times in a month. Next. Okay, so we asked households how their food and nutrition security had changed compared to pre-pandemic periods. So we find that 41% and 42% of households reported that their nutritional quality of diet and the food quantity of their diet had declined compared to a period pre-pandemic. So that's approximately 2 in 5 households who report a decline either in quantity or in quality of the diet. Again, this was higher amongst urban households and rural households. So we're repeating the same thing. We actually see the food shortages, dietary quality is poorer amongst urban than rural households. And if we asked households about how they felt the food situation would look over the next coming 3 months, the outlook was quite pessimistic. So approximately a third of our sample said they didn't know or couldn't say, but only 16% of the respondents reported that they thought the food situation would actually improve. Next time. And then I'll end here before handing over to Deepa, just talking briefly about health impacts of COVID-19. So 23% of the households reported that they had experienced incurred a health expenditure. Of those, about 13% said that they had spent more than 50,000 rupees on that health expenditure.
13%.
13%. 3% of the households, that is a little over 180 households, reported that someone had died of COVID 19. This is quite a large number, but the sampling is also purposive, so it might be an artifact of that. 45% of those who reported that someone had died of COVID 19 said that they had not received any death compensation for that member. And then finally, 32% of the households, so a little less than a third of the households, said that as a result of COVID 19, a household member had either lost their job or had lost wages. So this is some health impacts spilling over into economic impacts. And hand over to Deepa.
Thank you. So just the last segment, we want to share the findings in relation to the social safety nets. Like we saw in Hunger Watch 1, we found that while there is quite a large prevalence of food insecurity and people are reporting that compared to the pre-pandemic period, the nutritional quantity and quality has reduced, some of the schemes, particularly the PDS, the next slide, we saw was reaching people. Okay, starting with the Narega. So e-Shram is this new initiative of registering unorganized sector workers, and of our sample, 26% of the households had an earning member who was already registered, but only 18% of the households, but our sample includes rural and urban, had any household who had worked on Narega work site in the last 3 months. And of those who used the Narega, about 28% said that they had applied for work but had not received it in the last 3 months. Next slide. So if you look at the ration, the PDS, overall looking at different kinds of ration cards, so there is the priority card and Antodaya Anna Yojana, which is covered under the National Food Security Act, and then there are the state ration cards. All of these put together, 84% of the respondents had some form of ration card. So there is still an exclusion, although our sample was focused on marginalized communities. So all of them should have had a ration card. We have about 16% who don't have any card at all. And if you look at the breakup, around 52% had the ration cards under MFSA, while there was a big chunk of people who also, almost 1/3, who had a ration card, but that was the state government issued ration card. And this is important because the entitlements differ. Most of the benefits announced, relief announced by the central government is only for those who have NFSA cards. Next slide. However, what was encouraging, and was there a slide before this? Yeah. Okay. It's anyway. Of those who had a ration card and those who were eligible, यहाँ पे नंबर नहीं दिख रहा है. लगभग सभी को राशन मिला था. Almost 81% got the free, that is of the free grains given under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. हर महीने कम लोगों को मिला. I think it was around 60%, but most people had got some rations under the PMGKY. This is what we saw in Hunger Watch 1 as well. And although in the full report we will do the further analysis based on our conversations during the survey. It came out very clearly कि ये जो additional 5 किलो मिल रहा था उससे बहुत फर्क पड़ा लोगों को, कि अगर वो भी नहीं होता तो जो रिजल्ट हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि न्यूट्रिशनल क्वालिटी घट गया है, रात को बिना खाए सो रहे थे, वो शायद और भी बहुत ज्यादा होता. It's because they got that. It was still better. A lot of people told us that at least the cereal sufficiency was met to some extent because they were getting this additional grain. Yeah, next slide. But the other schemes were not as effective. If you look at ICDS and midday meal, इन दोनों स्कूल schemes में गरम पका हुआ खाना नहीं मिल रहा था ये पूरे समय के दौरान. अभी schools खुल गए हैं, फिर भी मध्याह्न भोजन नहीं खुला है. So they were supposed to get either dry rations or cash transfer. On the whole, about a quarter of households, about 28% in the case of ICDS and 24% in the case of midday meals, did not get anything. So they didn't get either cash or rations. On the ration and cash, so the 3/4 who got it, we didn't ask detailed questions because this was a rapid survey. But again, based on experience and while we were conducting the survey and talking to people, we know that although they got it, it was very irregular and the quantity was not very much and so on. Next. The other schemes, the worst coverage from the point of view of coverage was the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana, where 78% of the women, this was self-reported. तो जिन्होंने कहा कि उनको मिलना चाहिए था पिछले 2 साल में, उनमें से ऑलमोस्ट 80% महिलाओं को प्रधानमंत्री मातृ वंदना योजना नहीं मिला. This is also validated by Right to Food campaign ने 2020 में भी एक सर्वे किया था, उसमें भी almost exactly same number आया था, even that was across about 10 states. 36% people households did not where there was somebody eligible for pension did not get the pension at all. Next. So this PDF came later. So next. So just to summarize what we're seeing from what the three of us presented is that although it's now been 2 years after the national lockdown and there is a lot of discussion on recovery. जब हम budget speech सुने, economic survey देखे, newspaper देखे, हर जगह बात recovery की हो रही है कि growth rate negative थी और अब positive हो गया है और economy वापस दौड़ने लगी है. लेकिन हमारे सर्वे से ये क्लियरली निकलता है कि जो गरीब और असंगठित क्षेत्र के लोग हैं, जिन this survey was focused on those in the informal sector and those from poorer communities, that amongst them the distress continues. There is people's incomes have not recovered to the levels that were there before pandemic, and we know that that was also not great. People's food security, both in terms of how much food they consume and the kind of food they consume, has also not recovered to pre-pandemic levels. And each time, although I'm repeating, we have to remember that pre-pandemic level is also not an adequate level. There were already huge gaps before March 2020. उसके बाद तब जितना था वहां तक भी लोग वापस नहीं पहुंच पाए हैं, although it has been almost 2 years. Next slide. And we see this in quantity as well as in quality. Some of these figures are quite striking actually. For instance, you see that only half the sample said that they ate eggs, and that too less than 2-3 times a month. So things which were, and again when we were doing the survey, some questions in some households, people would just laugh when we would say, अच्छा दूध कितने बार पीते हैं? They would say दूध तो है ही नहीं हमारे डाइट से, या आता है तो like we didn't get into how much दूध, for example. Even if they said कि पहले बच्चे के लिए दूध मंगाते थे, अब कभी कभी आता है सिर्फ चाय के लिए, हमने यहाँ पे हाँ लिखा है कि हर हफ्ता आता है. Despite that, this is what the situation is. So last, next. इस पे बाकी लोग भी काफी बोलेंगे. Basically again, like on Hunger Watch 1, the only positive news in that sense one has to give is that compared to Hunger Watch 1, which was in 2020 end, which was almost immediately after the lockdown, उसके related थोड़ा सा स्थिति बेहतर है. लेकिन अगर हम पैंडेमिक से पहले से के तुलने में देखें तो रिकवरी बिल्कुल नहीं हुआ है. तो ये जो राइट टू फूड कैंपेन के डिमांड्स इस हालात को देखते हुए जो उठे हैं, they all continue to be still relevant. Universalizing the PDS, like we said, many people still don't have ration cards and they're not eligible, and the government's response is the One Nation, One Ration Card. Kavita will talk to us about the experience of that from Rajasthan. Into expanding midday meals and ICDS. I hope Amrita will also mention that कि दिल्ली में क्या हो रहा है उसका स्थिति. And now when schools reopen and children come back, it can't be just the same business as usual. बच्चे भी भूखे रहे हैं इतना दिन, तो उनको इनफैक्ट ब्रेकफास्ट भी देना चाहिए, अंडा भी देना चाहिए वगैरह. Pension, like we saw in the results, the urban situation is actually much worse. The urban poor have been even more negatively impacted than the rural poor from our sample. And so urban schemes, an urban employment guarantee, expanding the rural employment guarantee, allocating enough funds for all of this, and at the end of it, that all of these schemes run on the shoulders of frontline workers. They run on the shoulders of Anganwadi workers, Asha workers, midday meal cooks and helpers. So by expanding these schemes, also strengthen them, recognize their work and contribution. So improving their work conditions is also very much part of this whatever response that needs to be there to improve, to at least help people in this context of the COVID and economic distress cost kind of distress on the poor. So these are all still band-aids while we think about how we can have a more employment intensive, economic model where inequality declines. These are things we can do now. Like ये चीजें हमें बजट में देखना चाहिए था जो नहीं दिखा, जिसकी हम उम्मीद कर रहे हैं कि कुछ चर्चा तो हो बजट सेशन में. So I would request Kavita to now.
Use that slide.
Yeah, we'll keep this slide on.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have also put it in a slide. I'm very sorry, but I'll use old-fashioned, just talking to all of you. So in Rajasthan, in the month of October, November, we did the survey on ONOR, One Nation, One Ration, which was supposed to be the panacea for the migrant workers. Then the government had no database to show in the Supreme Court. It had actually nothing to tell about them. They said, well, we have this honor. So we did a survey because this honor came in May, that's a May order. So we tried to do it 6 months since it was implemented. So we surveyed 431 migrant workers, this is in Rajasthan, from 17 districts of Rajasthan. And we included both interstate and intrastate because honor doesn't say that it will only be interstate, it's inter and intra. So the first finding itself tells the story. 40% of the migrant workers are not beneficiaries of the NFSA in their home place, whether it be another district, whether it be another state. So they can't be benefited from honor because of various reasons. Because they have no ration card, no Aadhaar, no name included in NFSA list. So you realize that honor was talked in a major way. However, what was required was increasing the beneficiaries from the 2011 census to bring it up to projected populations of 2020 or whatever, and many other things, and all this documentation for Aadhaar that you need. You need a lot of things. You have to show that you're a resident of this place. You have to have some card to get another card. And if you don't have that one thing that you're a resident of this place, and no government person will give you that. So basically, 40% are not beneficiaries of NFSA in their home state. So how can we get home? Second, only 21% of the migrant workers knew that they could take ration with an active ration card in the state or district. 21% knew that there was such a scheme, and the term ONOR, One Nation, One Ration, only about 15% had heard. Now this is also very important. Out of those whose families are taking benefits of NFSA in home village, only 13% have taken benefits of ONOR. Of all those taking e-benefits in their home state, home place, home district, only 13% have taken the benefits of honor. Those who try to take benefits of honor have been told by ration dealers, your name is not showing in the system, or the ration dealer said that they were not aware of honor and they refused to give. Finally, 90%, this is a subjective part of question. They thought that, if some effort, if they're given a card, if they have a ration card, if they're on the NFSA list, if the ration dealer knows, then maybe it's a good scheme. But that is, you first need a card in your home state, you need to have all the documents to get an NFSA, to get a ration card, and to be listed under the NFSA beneficiary list, which is itself an increase of quota. At the moment, 67% of only 2011 population. So this is a small, I won't go into the details, but these are like some 4 or 5 points to highlight, to say that actually honor was simply to not do the things that they were actually supposed to do, which was increase the number of beneficiaries, reduce documentation, etc.
Thanks, Kavita. I think just to repeat that one figure, amongst migrant workers, 40% in their study in Rajasthan did not have any ration card. अपने घर पे. So, honor being a solution for rations for migrants doesn't work in the absence of universalization. Anjali?
Thanks, Deepa. So the findings have been shared. I think the important thing here is how governments have responded and why this entire exercise is so important. We've consistently heard from the government that after the first wave, when the national lockdown was imposed, of course, it was all very visible what was happening. There were people, there were migrants who were walking on the streets. There was a lot of coverage in the media. There was suddenly visible distress and crisis that was there. But in the second and third waves, there was no national lockdown that was imposed. तो जब national lockdown imposed नहीं हुआ, तो सभी सरकारों ने, especially the central government, but सभी सरकारों ने ये एक अपना लिया point of view कि कोई problem ही नहीं है क्योंकि हमने तो lockdown किया ही नहीं है, इसलिए हमारी कोई जरूरत ही नहीं है to take any action to resolve any kind of crisis. So what we are seeing here by way of the second hunger watch, the survey, is how deep-rooted the crisis has been in terms of food security. And we have seen there are, in fact, the government itself has eventually put out data where it has shown that in every single state and union territory of the country, there were lockdowns that were imposed. There were localized lockdown at a state and UT level, not at a national level, but it still impacted people, especially the 85 to 90% people who work in the unorganized sector, the workforce that is in the unorganized sector. अब अगर हम देखें कि जो सभी साथियों ने फाइंडिंग्स बताई हैं हमें, ये एक चीज बार बार आती है कि सरकार कहती है कि हम तो सबसे बड़ा फूड सिक्योरिटी प्रोग्राम चलाते हैं विश्व में. We run one of the largest food programs in the world. Now, what we are seeing here is that there is a substantiation of the fact that those who have ration cards, actually for them PDS did become a lifeline. For people who said that 90% लोग जिनके पास राशन कार्ड थे, जो एलिजिबल थे राशन कार्ड लेने के लिए, उन्होंने कहा हमें राशन मिला और PMGKAY के तहत दुगना राशन भी लोगों तक पहुंचा है. But there are two kinds of things which have become very evident even in the findings of the hunger survey. One is that despite that, nutrition levels have fallen, which means that क्योंकि बार-बार जो कैंपेन ने बात कही कि आप एक बास्केट को बढ़ा दीजिए, you cannot limit it to just rice and wheat. You have to give pulses, you have to give cooking oil, you have to give other kinds of nutrition as well. That has not been done, and we are seeing the kind of nutrition levels, 41% saying that nutritional quality of diet actually deteriorated compared to the pre-pandemic levels. दूसरी चीज जो मेरे ख्याल से बहुत स्पष्ट है कि जिस तरीके का लाइवलीहुड्स का लॉस हुआ और इन्फ्लेशन जो हम देखे जा रहे हैं, ये डीजल प्राइसेस को इंक्रीज करके जो इन्फ्लेशन हो रही है, उसके चलते those who don't have ration cards have absolutely nowhere to turn to. And as soon as the national lockdown had happened, after that there was a furore and migrant workers का पूरा जब क्राइसिस हुआ, उस समय पर केंद्रीय सरकार ने आत्मनिर्भर स्कीम स्टार्ट करी. 2 महीने केवल चलाई, उसके बाद वो स्कीम कभी लागू नहीं हुई to cover those who don't have ration cards. And despite the fact that we are still very much in the throes of the pandemic, एक के बाद एक लहर आती है, लेकिन आत्मनिर्भर स्कीम को लागू नहीं किया गया. And this is not just something that we are saying. The Supreme Court itself took suo motu cognizance of the miseries that were being faced by migrant workers. और उसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने 4 आदेश दिए थे. पहला आदेश ये था कि जितने राशन कार्ड हैं उनको इंक्रीज कर दीजिए as per the latest population estimates, क्योंकि सेंसस 2011 के हिसाब से राशन कार्ड इशू किए गए थे. तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट से don't wait for the next census, just increase the number of ration cards. हम लोग ने RTI applications फाइल करी कि सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने क्या किया है to do that, and the central government has said no, we will wait for the next census and only then will we increase the number of ration cards. So that's a
Supreme Court order. Or
Yes.
was it observation?
no, this was a direction by the Supreme
Yeah,
Court.
That take note of this, and
and do something about the numbers, because it came in every
Increase the coverage under
Increase the
NFS.
coverage. Very, very clearly. That is the
Direction.
And the central government has gone on record in response to an RTI application to say we are not going to do it till the next census happens. Reports आ रही है कि अभी next census होने नहीं वाला है any time soon, which means that जो 10 करोड़ लोग जो कि कवर होने चाहिए हैं कायदे से, एक्स्ट्रा लोग जिनको राशन कार्ड मिलना चाहिए वो वंचित रह रहे हैं. And the other thing which was supposed to be done, which I think Kavita has talked about, so I won't go into any detail. Of course, central government ने आके बोला कि ONOR हम चला रहे हैं. अब ONOR का मतलब ही नहीं है जिन migrants के पास, जिन unorganized sector workers के पास राशन कार्ड नहीं है, उनको ONOR से क्या होगा? One nation, one ration में वो है ही नहीं जब. It means nothing. The other direction that the government, the court had given was सारी state governments will put in place a scheme till the pandemic ends to give rations to those who don't have ration cards. किसी स्टेट ने स्कीम शुरू नहीं की. It was a time bound direction and the central government was directed कि अगर कोई स्टेट आपसे मांगेगी तो आपको देना पड़ेगा राशन. And when we legal notices were sent, RTI applications were filed. RTI के रिस्पांस में सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने कहा कि केवल 2 स्टेट्स ने हमसे मांगा और वो भी हमने नहीं दिया. They have clearly stated that they have not given grains to those states also that asked for the grains. There were only 2 states. And despite legal notices, the states have not come back saying हमने क्या scheme लागू करी है to help to give rations, dry rations to workers, migrant workers. And दिल्ली जैसी जगह में अगर हम देखें, पहले वेव में ई-कूपन स्कीम के तहत जितने लोग हैं दिल्ली में जिनके पास राशन कार्ड है, उतने ही लोगों ने 70 लाख लोगों के करीब हैं, उन्होंने आके राशन उठाया क्योंकि उनके पास राशन कार्ड नहीं थे. ई-कूपन्स लिए और राशन उठाया. इसका मतलब है the government itself has those names, figures, numbers of people who need ration but don't have ration cards. But despite that, the Delhi government, I mean, Amrita will be talking about the Delhi results, but the Delhi government has not started a proper scheme after the first lockdown. And recent surveys that were done by the Delhi Rozi Roti Adhikar Abhiyan showed that 80% से ज़्यादा designated school जो थे जहाँ से लोगों को राशन मिलना था, अगर उनके पास राशन कार्ड नहीं है, वहाँ पे स्टॉक नहीं थे. लोगों को सुबह 4 बजे से खड़ा होना पड़ता था और वापस जाना पड़ता था without any ration. So that has been in a complete mess as well. And hot cooked meals भी दिए जाने थे, वो भी सही से नहीं दिए गए हैं most of the states. Yeah. Finally, midday meals ka, I think the report, the Hunger Watch survey has shown how terribly quarter of the households with eligible members said they did not receive midday meals and the ICDS provisions. Deepa has also done the budget analysis and 50% reduction in real terms है midday meal scheme का. And ground पे हमने देखा है कि despite the Supreme Court taking cognizance, कोई तरीका नहीं है मिड डे मील बच्चों को प्रोवाइड करने का, डिस्पाइट द फैक्ट दैट एवरीबडी नोज दैट वन हॉट कुक्ड मील वाज सो इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर न्यूट्रिशन ऑफ चिल्ड्रन. दिल्ली में वी सेंट लीगल नोटिसेस रिसेंटली बिकॉज देयर वाज नथिंग हैपनिंग. मतलब अब फाइनली स्कूल्स भी रिज्यूम कर दिए हैं, उसके बावजूद मिड डे मील्स बच्चों को नहीं दिए जा रहे. उनको सारी जगह से नोटिसेस आए और मैसेजेस आए कि आप अपना खाना खुद लेके आइएगा घर से. एंड जब कहा भी गया सरकार द्वारा कि हम राशन पहुंचाएंगे, it has been totally erratic. Most children that we have spoken to, their families have said that they have not received anything in the last several months.
So this take-home rations from Anganwadi and midday meals is a very big scandal. It's going to be, the food never reached the children and it just got lifted. It was a lot, 2 kgs of rice, of dal and 3 kgs of rice. And for pregnant and lactating women, it was 3 kgs of rice and 3 or grain, whatever, wheat and dal. It's a very big scandal because it's almost like of 24 months, something like 20 months was supposed to be home delivered. And yeah, it was supposed to be almost 20 months of delivery of take-home rations. And at least our estimate in Rajasthan, and I think similarly in other states, it's like a 60 to 70% diversion. people did not even know they were getting it. The most important thing is that a social audit demand, which we are coming to our demands, a social audit is very, very important of both the Anganwadi food take-home ration and the midday meal dry rations that were passed on.
And thanks. Just have one more speaker. Amrita will share the experience in Delhi, and once again I think ये बहुत it's very important, not only capital city, जैसे हमने हमारे सर्वे में देखा कि शायद पहली बार ऐसा निकल रहा है कि शहरी इलाकों में जो असर पड़ा है वो ग्रामीण इलाकों से भी ज्यादा है। तो हम दिल्ली का सुनेंगे। एक हमारे साथी राजेंद्रन जो सर्वे के साथ जुड़े हुए थे याद दिला रहे हैं कि मांगों में ये भी था, एंड दिस वाज सपोर्टेड बाय मेनी इकोनॉमिस्ट्स right from 2020 that there should be some sort of a cash transfer also to everyone, क्योंकि along with the grains at this time जहाँ पे employment नहीं मिल रहा है और income पे ये है, और उन लोगों ने एक हिसाब लगाया था कि if you give 3,000 rupees for 6 months to vulnerable households, it's less than 2% of the GDP. Again, that's something many countries across the world have done, but हमारे देश में ऐसा कुछ नहीं हुआ।
Sorry, can you just say less than 2% GDP for?
I'll tell you the exact.
Right.
So thank you. तो दिल्ली में हमने जब सर्वे किया था, हमने दिसंबर जनवरी में करा था, और सर्वे दिल्ली रोजी रोटी अधिकार अभियान की ओर से कोऑर्डिनेट हुआ था। कई साथी भी बैठे, अशोक भी बैठे, जिन्होंने सर्वेस करे थे। दिल्ली में हमने कुल 280 हाउस होल्ड कवर करे, और अगर हम ओवरऑल थोड़ा सा प्रोफाइल आपको बता दें तो उसमें से 90% महिलाएं थी जिनसे हमने बात करा। 33% सिंगल विमेन हेडेड हाउस होल्ड थे, सो ईदर विडोवर्स और women who were not living with their parents. 67% of the households जो थे वो slum settlements में थे. Now, in terms of the results, if we just look at the issue of income first, 36% households had a household income of less than rupees 7,000 in the last 3 months. अब अगर आप दिल्ली में केवल गुजर बसर का खर्चा देखेंगे तो आप कहीं पे भी दिल्ली में रहेंगे तो आपका छोटे से छोटे एक कमरे का भी रेंट झुग्गी में 2,500-3,000 से कम नहीं है। तो अगर आपका 7,000 है मंथली इनकम आपके हाउस होल्ड का, तो उसमें 3,000 आपका सीधा रेंट निकल गया। आफ्टर दैट टू मैनेज योर ट्रांसपोर्ट, खाना, कपड़ा, बेसिक just survival, it's very clear that obviously this is totally inadequate. 82% of the respondents said that their monthly income had decreased in relation to the pre-pandemic time. और जिन लोगों की डिक्रीज की पैंडेमिक टाइम में इनकम, उसमें से 70% ने बताया कि हमारी आधी हो गई है ड्यूरिंग द पैंडेमिक। सो इन द लास्ट 2 years our incomes have halved. Obviously this has led to huge amount of debt among people. If you look at it in terms of the total number of people, 65% of the household said कि उन्हें लोन लेना पड़ा, पैसा उठाना पड़ा, और उसमें से जिन लोगों ने डेट लिया उसमें 33% had a debt of more than rupees 50,000. So on an average family income of 7,000, having a debt of 50,000, you can see where this is headed. One of the very alarming findings was that actually a huge percentage of people, 68%, said that they had unpaid rent of many months, which will obviously over a period of time actually lead to होमलेसनेस। और ये हमने देखा भी कि कुछ लोग जो थोड़े अनऑथराइज कॉलोनीज में रहते थे उनको झुग्गी बस्ती में शिफ्ट हुए वो पैंडेमिक के दौरान, और कुछ लोग जो बस्ती हुए थे वो अपना रेंट भी ना देने के कारण एक्चुअली होमलेस की स्थिति में आ गए। अगर हम न्यूट्रिशन की तरफ देखें तो 81% said that they were unable to eat healthy or nutritious food in the last 1 month. This I'm sharing only the Delhi results. The questionnaire were exactly the same. तो जो उन्होंने आपको भी समझाया था कि किस तरीके से जो एक ग्लोबल इंडेक्स है उसको इस्तेमाल किया, तो ये उसी के दिल्ली स्पेसिफिक रिजल्ट्स है। More than 50% said that they had to skip meals in the last month, and 51% said that they actually ran out of food. So this was a question in the survey कि क्या ऐसा कभी हुआ कि आपके घर में राशन खत्म ही हो गया, मतलब एक भी दाना चावल, एक भी गेहूं नहीं था। 50% से ज्यादा ने बताया कि हाँ ऐसा हमारे साथ
Amrita,
हुआ।
can you repeat those figures? 81% reported
that they were unable to eat healthy or nutritious food in the last 1 month. This is a self-reporting that they did. 52% said कि उनको पिछले महीने मील स्किप करने पड़े क्योंकि अफोर्ड नहीं कर पाए या राशन नहीं था, और 51% हाउस होल्ड ने बताया कि उनका राशन घर में खत्म हो गया था। और खत्म मतलब एक्चुअली खत्म हो गया था, बिकॉज इस क्वेश्चन में हमें एक्सप्लेन करना था कि मतलब असली में खत्म हो गया ना, एक भी चावल, एक भी गेहूं की बोरी, कुछ नहीं है आपके पास। एक और जो जरूरी चीज है जो इन्फ्लेशन से भी लिंक्ड है, और क्योंकि वो जब से गैस सब्सिडी बंद हुई है, ये एक बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा बन गया दिल्ली जैसी जगह में स्पेशली। तो दिल्ली में आपके पास कोई और कुकिंग फ्यूल नहीं है, आप लकड़ी मकड़ी नहीं जला सकते, आप एक छोटी से कमरे में जब रह रहे हैं। 54% ने बताया कि वो पिछले मंथ कुकिंग गैस नहीं अपना रिफिल करवा पाए। तो ये जो सिलेंडर्स भी दिए हुए हैं, ये बहुत सारे घरों में सिलेंडर्स बिल्कुल खाली पड़े हुए हैं और उनमें कुछ भी गैस नहीं है। One is this overall kind of figures, and obviously these figures themselves tell a story. Now one of the questions was on the diversity in diet. 30% ने बताया कि वो पिछले महीने में उन्होंने 3 या 4 बारी से कम दाल खाई। 43% जो कि नॉनवेज खाते हैं, उन्होंने बताया कि उन्होंने एक भी अंडा नहीं खाया पिछले महीने में। दिल्ली में उस समय जब हम ये सर्वे कर रहे थे, अंडे की प्राइसेस 10 to 12 रुपीज था पर एग। एंड दीज आर थिंग्स जो लोग बोल रहे थे कि पहले हम 4 से 6 रुपए में एक अंडा खरीदते थे, अभी एक अंडा 10 से 12 रुपए में आ रहा है ड्यू टू द इंक्रीज इन फ्यूल प्राइसेस एंड द ओवरऑल इन्फ्लेशन। 41% ऑफ द पीपल जो नॉनवेज खाते हैं, मतलब कि उनके बच्चों की आदत है कुछ नॉनवेज खाने की, 41% लोगों ने बताया कि पिछले एक महीने में वो एक भी बार नॉनवेज नहीं अफोर्ड कर पाए। And obviously all of this leads to even poorer food intake among children, because also children are a little bit more fussy and are used to eating certain kind of food and will not easily switch their diets. If we look at green vegetables, 38% people said that they were eating green vegetables less than once a week. Now I remember हम लोग लाल गुम्बद कैंप जो शेखसराय फेज 1 में, वहाँ पे जब हम सर्वे कर रहे थे, तो एक महिला से हमने पूछा कि आपने हरी सब्जी कितनी बार खाई महीने में। तो पहले तो वो हंसने लगे, बोलती अब तो सब्जी का सोचते भी नहीं है, जो थोड़ा कुछ चावल होता है, जो थोड़ा कुछ और दाल होता है, उसी में बस पानी से मिला के खा लेते हैं। और दाल, उन्होंने अपने मुंह से बोला कि कुछ 5-6 दाने होते हैं दाल के, वो मेनली तो पानी होता है। फिर हमने और पूछा कि पर एक बार तो कभी खाया होगा, कितनी बार आपने खरीदा? एक भी बार नहीं खरीदा। फिर उन्होंने बताया पूरे एक महीने में मैंने केवल 2 बार पालक खाई, और वो कब खाई? जहाँ पे मैं काम करती थी, उनके घर में जब पालक बनी तो उन्होंने बोला कि आप थोड़ी सी पालक ले लो। So these are real lived experiences, because sometimes the statistics tend to hide the real deprivation that's happening. Similarly, if you look at the issue of milk, 44% of the household said that they could not afford milk for 1 full month. So we actually met women, एक चंचल नाम की रिस्पोंडेंट थी हमारे यहाँ लाल गुम्बद कैंप पे, जिन्होंने बताया कि उनके बच्चों ने पिछले 2 साल से काली चाय पीने की आदत डाल दी, क्योंकि एक बूंद दूध नहीं आया है जब से कोविड का ही 2020 से लॉकडाउन हुआ है। So these are stark things, these are things happening in the capital city. We are barely 10 kilometers away from parliament. These are all happening a stone's throw away from here. And this is something which is very visible. One cannot say कि क्या पता है कि एक किसी देश के कोने में, एक झारखंड के एक किसी जिले में, एक तालुका के अंदर क्या हो रहा है, ये आपकी दिल्ली में ये सबके सामने हो रहा है, सरकार को ये चीज पता है। And yet I think colleagues have spoken about how dismal the government response has been. The only last thing that I wanted to just flag that Anjali spoke about a little bit on the midday meal is कि दिल्ली सरकार ने और एमसीडीज ने बच्चों से कंसेंट फॉर्म साइन कराया कि आप अपने घर से खाना लाएंगे। So which I mean basically it seems like कि there's some plan to actually not restart midday meals. जब ये हमने लीगल नोटिस भेजा है, तो लीगल नोटिस का तो कोई जवाब नहीं दिया, पर मीडिया को दिल्ली सरकार ने जवाब दिया, बोला है कि हमने डोर स्टेप डिलीवरी करी है मिड डे मील के राशन की। आप किसी से पूछ लीजिए, ये हमारी गारंटी है कि किसी से आप पूछ लीजिए, किसी के घर तक राशन डोर स्टेप डिलीवरी का मिड डे मील से किसी को नहीं पहुंचा है। So unfortunately it has become a game of just कि किसी तरह हम कुछ पब्लिकली बोल दें that world's largest food security program, doorstep delivery, one nation one ration, but the situation on the ground, and since many of the friends from the media are based in Delhi, we would be more than happy to actually facilitate these visits so that you can actually meet people, और ये जो statistics और figures हैं उनको जो real life में impact पड़ रहा है वो भी आप देख पाएं। Thank you.
Thank you. any questions? ज़्यादा लोग शायद फेसबुक पे हैं than here.
Just say it
और
loudly.
जो लोग फेसबुक पर भी हैं, आप हमारे पेज में अगर कोई क्वेश्चन है तो आप कमेंट में डाल सकते हैं क्वेश्चन क्लैरिफिकेशन. और जब तक उसके इंतजार में मैं एक बार फिर से दोहरा देती हूँ, जैसे अमृता ने कहा, what we are saying, we shared a lot of figures, ये परसेंट, वो परसेंट, ये परसेंट and so on. बट ये सारे परसेंटेजेस के पीछे असली लोग हैं जिनसे बात की गई है, फोन पे नहीं, जाके मिलकर. और each one of that, and the figures really do not reflect the kind of stories that we got to see. जैसे हमने कहा, ये बहुत सिंपल टूल था. इसमें हमने जैसे वो 5 दाने दाल भी खाए तो हमारे सर्वे में दाल खा चुके. अगर हम उस डिटेल में जाएंगे तो और भी बहुत सारे कहानियां निकलेंगे. और ये हमें बिल्कुल, we have to see this in the context of the media continuously talking about a recovery, about the stock prices continuing to be high, growth rate पहले नेगेटिव था, अब पॉजिटिव हो गया. Keeping all that aside, उसके डिटेल में गए बिना, there are lakhs of people in this country. We are not claiming to be representative, पर इतना तो हम कह सकते हैं कि ये कोई हम ढूंढ के 7,000 नहीं खोजे हैं जो यही 7,000 इस देश में ऐसे हैं. They are definitely representing a big chunk of the population. इनको ढूंढना बहुत मुश्किल नहीं था. जहाँ पे हमारे वॉलंटियर्स एक्टिविस्ट काम करते हैं, वहां जाके लोगों से बात किए हैं. Yes, it is not a representative sample of the whole country, but it is telling us what is happening, or it is giving us some sort of an insight of what is happening to those who belong to marginalized communities, those who are in the informal sector, not only in some remote corners of the country, but also in our big cities, in the towns, all over, all across. और अभी हमने दिल्ली का भी सुना. Just to repeat some headline findings, 66% people said that their income has decreased compared to pre-pandemic period. 80% people, 80% लोगों ने किसी भी तरीके का खाद्य असुरक्षितता, फूड इनसिक्योरिटी रिपोर्ट किया है. मतलब 80% लोगों को वो जो स्केल हमने यूज किया उसके हिसाब से 80% घर में स्थिति ऐसा है कि हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि खाद्य सुरक्षा पूरी तरीके से वहां पे है. 25%, 4 घरों में से एक घर is what that scale, the way we use that scale would classify as severe in food insecurity. मतलब 80% में कुछ ना कुछ फूड इनसिक्योरिटी है, 25% में सिवियर फूड इनसिक्योरिटी है. और लगभग 40% लोगों ने कहा कि पैंडेमिक से पहले जितना वो खा पाते थे और जिस गुणवत्ता का खाना खा पाते थे, वो भी अभी वो लोग पैंडेमिक शुरू होने के 2 साल बाद उस लेवल तक भी नहीं पहुंच पाए हैं. तो हमें लगता है ये सारे काफी सिग्निफिकेंट फाइंडिंग्स रहे हैं और इसको लोगों के सामने रखने का ये भी एक उम्मीद है कि इन चीजों पर लोग लिखें.
There's a question on Facebook. Has the report been submitted to the Supreme Court and the PMO?
Released it only.
We've just released it. We will, of course, send it to both. Yeah.
To all constitutional authorities, including NHRC, which has a special working group on food
Speak into
security.
the mic. They can't hear you. You should not speak into the mic.
We'll send it to all constitutional authorities. Of course, the Prime Minister we have to, the Food Minister we will also send it to NHRC, which has a working group on food security. We'll also send it there. We'll also send it to all the states because this is a pretty broad study and covering about
7,000.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will also find its way into all the litigation that's happening in the various courts.
Why don't you just tell about the revival?
Yeah, there has been
Speak louder. They're saying.
yeah, several affidavits have been filed because there has been non-compliance with the directions of the Supreme Court. So the findings of this survey, I think, would be very relevant, and we will, wherever there is any litigation, of course, we also depending on this and appending this. So certainly it will be shared widely, I'm sure.
Just one more point I wanted to add, which I think came but might have got lost. An immediate demand जिस पे हम चाहते हैं कि immediate announcement हो is the extension of the PMGKY. अभी वो सिर्फ मार्च तक बोला गया है. अभी भी 90 million tons of food grain stocks are lying in FCI godowns. Through these 2 years, where we are seeing this 80% households facing food insecurity, FCI stocks have been at record high continuously. 2020 की शुरुआत से अब तक ऐसा नहीं कि बीच में घट गया या कुछ. Continuously we have had 90 million tons of food grains. This year, yesterday the results have come out. Food production has been record high in India again. So the farmers are delivering. We have the production. There is some amount of procurement, but the distribution is not happening. One very good way of doing it, and we see even from the Hunger Watch that it is reaching people, is through this PMGKAY, जो शायद अगले महीने से बंद हो जाएगा. तो वो कम से कम that announcement is what we will be looking for immediately.
One question, another question is that what are the things that should get done at the ground level, and what are the challenges that groups are facing when they're trying to solve the hunger issue? Should I repeat the question?
Yeah.
What are the things that should get done at the ground level, and what are the challenges that groups that are working on this issue are facing in solving hunger?
So the big challenge at the ground level is if state governments and the central government do not even want to recognize that there is a problem. And consistently when the food campaign has been raising the demand for universalization of PDS, the response that we've been getting is that people have ration cards. There's a large food security, one of the largest food security programs that are being run in the country. There is no problem, there is no crisis. So I think that what is really important is a recognition, and this is really the reason why this survey is so important, because it shows what the reality on the ground is. We hope that the central government and state governments take cognizance of this report and actually start rolling out proper schemes. A, to ensure that people who don't have ration cards are actually able to get some food security. And B, like Deepa said, PMGKAY needs to be extended at least till the pandemic is over. So there are all sorts of restrictions that keep existing, but food security programs are shut down one by one, like Atmanirbhar was shut down. We don't want this to happen with the PMGKAY.
Yeah, just to add a short thing to Anjali, we work in urban areas of Rajasthan, and the challenge on the ground is that if you don't have a single document, we have a large number of DNTNTs, the denotified tribes. It's just impossible to get them linked with the PDS because they don't have a single document. And they are in the cities, they are in rural areas. I mean, apart from the fact that they don't have any homestead land, no houses, that apart. Just basic living is so difficult. It's not just the DNTNTs, the denotified tribes, and the semi-nomadic, nomadic tribes, but also other homeless, the migrant workers who are, they don't have jobs all through the year. It's very, very difficult to actually get them linked to state support for food, and definitely their fate is hunger. And it's not that jobs, I mean, we also know similar studies have been done from the grassroots regarding what we've seen the drop in income. I mean, I don't have to go to any other study. So I really think that 2-3 things they have to do immediately. Get to projected populations of 2020. Till the planning commission was there, 2020 projected population always was the basis to begin a plan, So at least start the planning, give figures of the latest population of 2020. Keep doing your census when you want to. You have to first decide that you're going to scrap NRC, NPR. You want to add that, you want to do that. I mean, you messed it up. And you've lost the faith of the people in a census because you didn't tell me out of that. So you think about that. However, move with projected population, increase the number of beneficiaries, and we want unconditional ration, no Aadhaar. We don't want Aadhaar to be linked to ration. Otherwise, people just won't get the ration card, won't get the benefit. So these 2-3 things and honor is no panacea. Straightforward, people should get rations wherever they be, irrespective of where they are linked or not.
Couple of people are asking that what needs to happen. So maybe if somebody just lists out all the demands,
Yeah, just
they-
put
they
it on
just
the
tell
Doesn't
them
be
put
the
the-
post.
last slide. Keep the last slide on.
We're putting the demand slides on and
maybe
we post it on the Facebook
maybe
page.
highlight the main group.
There's a grain situation.
We had just said, na, 90 million tons of grains we have and record production this year again. So we're going to, it will only keep increasing. So if they don't do PMJKY, ये expanded नहीं करेंगे तो उनको भी मुसीबत होगी. And there the other issue some people have been raising but has not been getting enough attention is this whole push towards ethanol. Ki in the name of green fuel, that using the rice. So currently the policy, the price at which grain is given for ethanol industry is 1 rupee cheaper than the price at which the central government sells to state government if they want to do expanded TDS. तो राज्य सरकार को जिस कीमत में खरीदना पड़ता है अनाज वो 1 रुपए महंगा है from ethanol companies को
Per kilo.
per kilo. 1 rupee per kilo. Again in the context where state government don't have very much money and where we are seeing कि जैसे हमने हमारे सर्वे में भी दिखा कि बहुत सारे लोगों के पास जो राशन कार्ड है वो एनएफएसए कार्ड नहीं है, स्टेट कार्ड. तो उन कार्ड के लोगों को अगर राशन मिलना है तो वो केंद्र सरकार ऐसे खरीदती है और वो कीमत जिसमें खरीदती है वो इथेनॉल से भी एक्सपेंसिव प्राइस.
So in the end, you want to say that the free food campaign, which was during the pandemic, because in total, it is a total failure.
Not at all. Actually, if you what we want to say is that it worked. It was the only thing, in fact, that worked. But there were many. That was not enough. That it is not inadequate. Two things. एक तो जितना it did not cover everybody, but it helped a large number of people. Second, currently the environment is that now pandemic is over and we don't need to do it anymore. Like in Delhi, the non-ration card holders who were getting ration got it only for 2 months last in 2020 and again 2 months in 2021. But the situation remains the same. So this needs to continue over a longer term and those who are excluded need to be included. That's what we are saying.
Yeah, and although elections may have happened, will finish the next few days, it doesn't mean you close the additional 5 kgs that is going to 67% of the population. Don't close it.
And expand the food
Yeah.
basket.
We need oil prices have really shot up. We all can feel it in our own homes. So we talked about how milk was not available, eggs are not available, oil itself is not available.
Next month, it's predicted that the LPG cylinder prices are going to be double.
But we have one
Just speak into the mic if you say that.
So 67% in our survey said that they couldn't afford LPG. सबके पास सिलेंडर का कनेक्शन तो आ गया है लेकिन अब रिफिल नहीं करा पा रहे हैं.
So 67% said last month they couldn't afford LPG, and next month after elections, today it's reported in the newspapers that they're going to double the prices of LPG gas cylinders.
And if you look at the budget documents, the LPG, DBT and Ujjwala का जो budget है allocation has come down at least 10 times drastically. So 4 years back we heard give it up and the poor will get a subsidy, पर अब किसी को नहीं मिल रहा है subsidy. वो phase out हो गया. So again, thank you those who joined.
One question. What implications does this have for women's workload and nutrition? If inflation, I think, because you guys were discussing inflation.
I'll try and give a 2-line answer. It has obviously has a lot of implications. People have written about it. Again, 71% of our respondents were women. Again, it was not as random and so on, but from participating in the survey also, women are definitely more concerned because putting the food on the plate is finally their responsibility. The whole issue of the unpaid work burden on women with all these services being disrupted. कि स्कूल में अगर मध्याह्न भोजन नहीं मिल रहा है, अभी स्कूल खुल गया फिर भी खाना नहीं मिल रहा है, आंगनवाड़ी में खाना नहीं मिल रहा है, तो वो भी महिला को करना पड़ता है. और घर में हम जानते हैं बहुत सारे रिसर्च है ये भी दिखाने के लिए कि within the household also women get a raw deal. And so when there is less coming into the household, women and then children are even worse affected. in when we talk about women's work, to remind ourselves also, एक कैटेगरी जहाँ पे महिलाएं क्लियरली घर के बाहर काम करती है और सरकारी नौकरी सो टू से उनकी है, लेकिन उनको नहीं पहचाना जाता है। आंगनवाड़ी कार्यकर्ता, आंगनवाड़ी हेल्पर, आशा, मध्याह्न भोजन जो बनाते हैं, कुक्स एंड हेल्पर, दीज पुट टुगेदर आर 60 लाख वुमेन इन दिस कंट्री। कम से कम उनका काम भी हम पहचान लें, वहां से शुरुआत करें अगर सरकार, तो फिर हम महिला का काम और पोषण के बारे में।
और दिल्ली में 3 हफ्तों से धरना चल रहा है।
दिल्ली में स्ट्राइक चल रहा है, हैदराबाद में मिड डे मील वर्कर्स का चल रहा है और उसका कोई रेस्पॉन्स भी नहीं आया। Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining on Facebook, Instagram, जो लोग Twitter पे follow कर रहे हैं।
Please highlight these issues everywhere so that at least the Parliament can take up business.
And in the whichever pages you're watching on, we will be sharing links to the PPT and the note and so on. Thank you.
Share the soft copy.